Hello, I am Ruby Falconer. Today's date is May 19th, 2020, and this is an astrological update from the perspective of shamanic Egyptian astrology. And I am a day late with this week's update. It's been a crazy time, and boy, doesn't that reflect what's going on for us all. So things to some degree have calmed down a little bit from last week, for some of us at least. Last week we had a lot going on with three planets stationary, Saturn, Venus, and Jupiter, all turning retrograde and joining Pluto, which is also now retrograde. However, even though that was incredibly intense, a lot of the intensity is still here. What happens when planets turn retrograde is the energy goes inward. So there's less outward movement with whatever that particular planet represents, but it is internalized. And a lot of times there's a sense of frustration and irritation that issues aren't being resolved. So we have all three of the great shift planets. That's Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter, all retrograde now. Pluto and Jupiter in Capricorn. Saturn is in Aquarius, but on July 1st, Saturn will retrograde back into Capricorn as well. So that energy that is represented by the Great Shift, which is a crumbling of established structures, is still very much there, and it's not going to go away. All three of these planets will turn direct in September in Capricorn, and that's sort of like round two of whatever it is that's going to continue on this transformative process. But during this next period of time, we are going to have a sense that we're adapting to what is. We won't have that feeling that we're going back to normal, but we will have a sense of some of the intensity lessening over time and a sense of that we're adjusting to this new reality. And there's not going to be a lot of forward movement in a lot of areas. And so that's going to continue to create dissension and issues for people. We are now moving into Gemini season. We already have Venus and Mercury in Gemini, and Venus is retrograde in Gemini. And so a lot of the dissent and the arguments and a lot of ideas, a lot of chaos going on in the realm of ideas. All of that has to do with Venus retrograde in Gemini. And we have tomorrow, Wednesday, the sun is going into Gemini. We have a new moon in Gemini on Friday. So there's a lot of Gemini energy. It's very intense right now. And Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac. And one of the ways to think about the wheel of the zodiac is all of the signs grow out of one another. So the first six signs of the zodiac, which is Aries through Virgo, is about the growth of the individual personality. Aries is about the desire to be. I exist. That's the key word for Aries. Taurus takes that desire to exist and grounds it in a body, in physical reality. And then Gemini comes along and thinks about it. And if we think about the development of a child, Gemini is that phase, the what is this? The questioning phase. So, why is the sky blue? Why is the stove hot? What's the name of that? What's going on here? Da, 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 da. And Gemini energy is kind of like that. It's interested in a lot of different things. Gemini is famous for that movement. I think some of you have heard me say that I like to call Gemini the hummingbird sign, because much like a hummingbird, Gemini goes from thought to thought, situation to situation, dancing around, a lot of variety, a lot of change, a lot of flexibility. And it's not that Gemini is wasting time, although some of the other signs, particularly the earth signs, might say that. I think of Gemini more like a hummingbird, in that you don't tell a hummingbird that they're fickle when they're moving around from flower to flower. They know exactly how much nectar they need to take from each flower, and then they move on. And so too Gemini. They know how much information they need to extract from any given situation, how much experience they need from any given situation, and then they move on. So that's the nature of Gemini. In shamanic Egyptian astrology, Gemini is allied with the Sphinx. And the Sphinx is one of the many earth altars that are scattered around the earth. And what I mean by earth altar is the objective of an altar, whether it's in a church or whether you set up an altar in your own home. An altar is designed to draw down divine energy, energy from divine source, from the great star nations, great mystery, whatever you think of that, to draw it down, pass it through the objects that are on the altar, and then disseminate that information out across the surface of the earth or into the immediate environment. In terms of the structures that are scattered around the world, and I'm talking about places like the Sphinx, the pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu, Chaco Canyon, any number of places in different places around the world that are considered to be sacred areas that have, in most cases, been there for many, many years. Stonehenge, Avebury, whatever it might be. These are earth altars, and they are meant to pull down energy from divine source, pass it through them, and in their case, disseminate it through the surface of the earth. So that's what Gemini does. And individuals who carry a lot of Gemini in their charts, Gemini personalities, are meant to be both receivers and transmitters of information. They are meant to receive information from the great star nations, pass it through their bodies, and often then they disseminate it. And they might disseminate it in communication. Gemini is famous for communication processes, whether it's writing or speaking or teaching. They might disseminate it in other ways, just through the essence of their being. But they're meant to do that, and they're also meant to draw up information from the earth itself and transmit it to the great star nations. So they're an intermediary between heaven and earth. And all of us, of course, have this capacity. We all have Gemini somewhere in our chart. But specifically, folks who have a lot of Gemini in their chart, this is in some degrees their mission, their job, what they're meant to do here on earth. So understanding that gives a person with Gemini energy a bit of, some understanding of themselves. And, sometimes I talk about how, Gemini, it's like they have a little antenna and they have to align themselves with the energies. These beautiful sacred sites that are scattered around the globe, most of them were built in alignment with specific areas of the sky, specific star clusters that they were meant to connect with and draw energy through those portals. And of course, that those connections don't last anymore. They're not there anymore because the stars have changed in relationship to Earth. Many years ago, when astrology was younger, that was not known, and so the term fixed stars came to apply to the stars because in the course of a lifetime, stars really don't move. Average movement for a star is 1 degree out of 365 over 72 years of life. So that's practically a lifetime. So you're not going to see the stars changing location. Now, clearly, as the Earth moves, as it moves around the sun, and as the Earth moves on its axis, we have different views of the stars at different times. But the stars themselves appear to be in the same place. And so many years ago, that term, many centuries ago, that term fixed stars came into common parlance, common astrological language to refer to the stars, but it's not true. They move too. And what has happened over the centuries is where those constellations are now is very different than where they were when these sacred sites were built centuries ago. And so there's no longer a direct connection. And so when we go to a sacred site, whether it's Stonehenge or Machu Picchu or Pisac or any of the other amazing places, Chartres Cathedral was built on an ancient sacred site. We feel the residue of those energies, but we're not feeling the direct connection. And so when a Gemini is out there with their little antenna attempting in some ways to connect, whether they're aware of it or not, and we can think of this connection as not just standing outside and being an earth altar, although I would certainly encourage that. it's a good thing for any of us to do, is to go out and connect with the stars and receive information to allow it to come down into us while simultaneously pulling energy up from the core of the earth and sending it upward. That's an amazing experiential process to have. Well, that's not something that Geminis are doing. They are receiving inspiration when they're communicating, when they're writing, when they're sharing information. They are inspired. And sometimes, inspiration is a fickle thing. Sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. Sometimes the antennae aren't quite connected and sometimes they are. So, it's a little bit like, again, to use another analogy, for those of you who might remember analog radios, that when you turn the knob, you have the static and you have to kind of turn the knob. And sometimes you have to turn it really carefully in order to plug into the signal. And then when you receive the signal, you hear the broadcast very clearly. So too for those earth altars, those who are connected to the Sphinx. This is the higher calling of those with Gemini energy. So I would like to offer a journey today, and we're going to locate it in the Sphinx, at the Sphinx. And for this particular new moon that we have coming up, we still have the great shift planets still very much in relationship to one another. That energy is not going to be going away. So that's still very much there. But this particular new moon is also, it's signified by a challenging relationship between Venus and Neptune. It's called a square, and the square is a 90-degree relationship. Venus is in Gemini retrograde, and Neptune is in Pisces. Now, Neptune is another one of the outer planets, and like the planets that are involved in the Great Shift, it is an arbiter of change. But for Neptune, it's slow, gradual change. So when Neptune comes in relationship, particularly with one of the inner planets, and Venus is one of the inner planets, it has a very strong effect. And in the case of Venus, which is all about values, Venus is Isis in the Egyptian pantheon, the great Queen Mother of Heaven. In the case of a square to Neptune, what we're finding, and this square has been in effect now for a couple of weeks, we're finding that values are very hard to hang on to. They're going through a process of transformation and change. And so this is a wonderful time for us as individuals to be checking in with our own value system to see if it's in alignment with our soul purpose. And collectively, what we're finding is that there's a lot of confusion around collective values. Neptune as a planet in traditional astrology represents cosmic consciousness, spiritual awareness, intuition, inspiration, illumination, imagination, and in its shadow, it represents confusion, illusion, delusion. And so on a collective level, we're seeing some shadow energy come through with Neptune, in that collectively, we don't know what our collective values are. That's part of this whole chaos and the idea of there's all of these different ideas. Gemini in its shadow is like, is juggling a lot of balls. In its shadow, there's a tendency to feel overwhelmed by the number of balls that Gemini is trying to juggle. And some of you may be feeling that on a personal level. And if you are, you're right in tune with the energies. But certainly we can see it going on collectively, that there's just all of these ideas flying around. And it's hard to know what our collective values are during this time. It's very confusing. There's a lot of chaos. And we simply don't have that sense of being in alignment on a collective level. So that energy is very much there. Now, in the Egyptian pantheon, Neptune is Nephthys, and Nephthys is the keeper of the mysteries behind the veils. Now, Isis and Nephthys, Isis is Venus, remember. Isis and Nephthys are sisters. Isis is the solar goddess. Nephthys is a lunar goddess. And these two are twins. So, it's hard to tell them apart if you see them represented on the walls or in the temples of Egypt, because they look exactly alike. They're twins, they're identical twins, except the difference is, and this again is not something to easily discern, Isis is more comfortable in the above world, and Nephthys is more comfortable in the below world. She's the wife of Set, while Isis is the wife of Osiris. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to spend a little bit of time with these two goddesses in the Sphinx, and outside of the Sphinx, actually. We're going to go in between the Sphinx paws, and we're going to receive energy from these two goddesses. Because during this time when we're working with what's going on with our internal value system and looking at how we need to better align it with our sense of soul purpose, our sense of who we are at a deeper level, there can be some confusion around that. At the same time, Nephthys can definitely take us behind the veils. It's a little bit like, the Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy pulls back the curtain and she sees who the Wizard of Oz really is. We have a lot of opportunities to see that, to see what's really going on behind the scenes, so to speak, both collectively, but we're going to work specifically in this little journey with our own personal process. So I would like to invite everyone to take a couple of nice deep breaths. Close your eyes. Breathing all the way down to your fingers, all the way down to your toes, letting go of any distractions. Allowing yourself to come completely present. This is your time. This is just for you. And I invite you to imagine that you are at the plain of Giza in Egypt, and you are standing in front of the Sphinx. Now, for those of you who have not been to Egypt, what I can tell you is that the Sphinx is huge. The tops of its paws came to the top of my head. That's how big the Sphinx is. So this is a huge structure, and if you were standing in front of it, you're going to need to tilt your head back and look up in order to see the face of the Pharaoh on the front of the Sphinx. And not only is this a sacred earth altar, it is positioned in a whole community of structures. There are other pyramids around, there are other structures around. This is part of a community, part of a center that dates back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. The latest carbon dating of the Sphinx goes back 14,000 years. It probably didn't look anything like it does today at that time. So you are standing in a very ancient space, surrounded by ancient structures. And so I invite you to breathe deeply. And there's no one else here. It's just you and these amazing structures. And it may be day, it may be night. Allow it to be whatever it is for you. But you are able to see. And I invite you to now to walk forward and approach the Sphinx and walk in between his paws and walk all the way up to his chest and turn around and lean against the chest of the Sphinx. And just take a moment to feel this energy. I'm going to be quiet for a moment and allow you to breathe this energy in and to feel its power. And coming now toward you is a woman. And she too enters the pause of the Sphinx. And she comes and stands in front of you. This is the great goddess Nephthys, mother of Anubis, consort of Set, lover of Osiris, sister of Isis, keeper of the mysteries behind the veils. She looks you in the eye, and you feel her power and her strength. She extends her hand out to you, and if you are willing, take her hand. And she will take you now on a journey behind the veils, into the mists, into the mystery. Enter the mystery with Nephthys and allow her to reveal to you something about your journey, your process that is hidden to you. It is time for this mystery to be made real, to be exposed, to enter into the light of your consciousness. And I'm going to be quiet now for a couple of minutes while you journey with Nephthys, the great lunar goddess, keeper of the mysteries behind the veils. Taking a nice gentle breath, you feel Nephthys drawing you toward her. And appearing behind you now is her twin sister Isis, Queen Mother of Heaven. Isis wraps her rainbow wings around you and invites you to lie back against her breast. Nephthys moves forward and wraps her rainbow wings around you. And you are held in the loving arms of these two beautiful sisters, goddess of heaven, goddess of the underworld, light and shadow, solar and lunar, wrapping their rainbow wings around you. Isis is with us in every transformation that we move through. So allow yourself to be held by her and by her sister Nephthys. I'm going to be quiet for a minute to allow you to receive from these two beautiful aspects of the divine feminine. Giving thanks to these two beautiful goddesses, giving thanks for all that you have received, and know that your connection to both of them is always there. Giving thanks to the Sphinx, this ancient living being who has served our planet for eons. Take a nice deep breath and come back into the room. So thank you for joining me. I will see you again.